Well, good morning, everyone. I hope everybody is doing well. I'm looking forward to this YouTube Live. You guys will probably notice I might be a little less animated and I'm going to be talking slower. And the reason for that is that Easiana, I told her about some broken molars I've had for over 10 years. Every tooth that was broken had been fixed for a lot of money by some dentists in America. And she said, "Oh, my dentist is a professor at the university. I can get you in." So that same day, I go in for a deep cleaning, whopping $60. Of course, I have no insurance, so $60. The dentist says, "Oh, yeah, you need implants and you need root canal. Can you come back tomorrow and the next day?" And I'm like, yes. So I've had the structure for the implants, not the crowns, and 2 root canals. And so the back of my mouth is pretty sore, but I think I had all of that done total under $1,500. So 3 days in a row, I sat in a dentist chair, and I think I'm going to have my hernia surgery done down here too. It'll be so cheap. So, hey, I see Paso, Dwayne. Yeah, Dwayne. I see Jim. I see David, and I know I always mispronounce it saying Sherry. I know I always mispronounce your name, and I see some more joining us this morning. So I'm excited about today. Normally I go about an hour and a half. I'll probably go about an hour just to protect the back left of my tongue is pretty raw. When they put the cover on one of the root canals, it was a little rough, so it kind of wore my tongue a little bit. But I am here in the beautiful city of Curitiba, Brazil. So I'm 2 hours ahead of y'all. And my experience here has been phenomenal. If you don't follow my Instagram or Facebook or look at my stories on there, the parking garages are all painted. As you drive, lights come on so they conserve energy. Oh, I can still kiss. Trust me. Yes. When you see this woman, you would understand what pain I would endure for a kiss. Absolutely, Sherry. It is a beautiful city. It's very clean. Yesterday, she took me to there's an Italian neighborhood, and there's a massive restaurant. When I say massive, I don't think I've been to a restaurant that big, and the food was outstanding. I could only eat, you guys know I do carnivore only, but they had very tender chicken, and that's normally my least favorite meat, but it was delicious. Of course, it took me forever to chew, but I have really been impressed with this city. I'm on a 12th floor Airbnb apartment that's fairly new. It's quite lovely. The window's open, so it is an incredibly quiet city. Of course, it's a Sunday morning. I've been really impressed with how lovely this city is. So I can definitely see myself splitting time between West Texas and Curitiba, Brazil. It's a really nice city. But that's not what y'all tuned in today to talk about. But that's what I've been up to. I'm going to go to a market. There's a lady that does this paper, and she folds it and makes beautiful image scenes, like not like a photo, but she had Caracara. I bought a toucan. I'm going to go back and get a couple more for my walls. So absolutely beautiful stuff. But you guys know that I had said that I'm going to talk about macro photography with flash. Okay. We're going to talk about the 7 to 14 millimeter f2.8. Even though I didn't bring it with me, there's some things I want to talk about. And we're going to talk about Hummingbird photography. And Sherry noted that using multi-flash setups in Ecuador for hummingbirds. And I'm going to talk about when you should use multi-flash, should you use a single flash, or should you use natural light? Because in late July at my house is when fall migration begins with hummingbirds. In a good year, I can have 200 to 300 hummingbirds in my yard at a time of 7 species. If I live down in the canyons, I could get up to 11 species and even more, but I chose my view by being up on top. My trees aren't as thick, so I'm not getting blue-throated mountain jim. I'm not going to probably get a white-eared hummingbird. My neighborhood in West Texas, now that's a stretch using the word neighborhood, but let's say the ranch that was turned into where I live, I think we have 90-something miles of unpaved road and about 100 full-time residents. Pretty sparse. But that neighborhood has had the same number of species of hummingbirds as Arizona, but we each have one different on the list. They have plain-capped star-throat, and we have amethyst-throated, which has only been seen in the U.S. once. So hummingbird photography can be really awesome at my place. Hey, good morning, Brandon. I see, we got at least one of my participants, maybe more from my mentorship program. So let's first jump into macro photography with flash. I would love for y'all to post. Let me know, have you ever tried macro with flash? And if not, why not? And if so, what's your biggest challenge? Let me repeat that. Throw in the chat, have you tried macro with flash? And if not, why not? And if so, what's your biggest challenge? Okay. So I would like to respond to some of those, but let me tell you about macro with flash for me. Whether I'm using the 90mm macro lens, okay, or whether I'm using the 150 to 400 for dragonflies, big damselflies, big butterflies. Most of the time, well, all the time I have a flash on. Sometimes I turn it off to do supplemental light. Sometimes I didn't go out necessarily intending to do macro and I end up doing some natural light macro. It's pretty rare that I do straight natural light macro. Dragonflies in flight, that's what I'm going to do. So I do that, but it's usually secondary, okay? Macro with flash, for me, many, many years ago, it was incredibly intimidating. And I understand that for many of y'all, flash seems very intimidating. We just had our flash session in my mentorship program and boiled it down to a pretty basic understanding of flash where you can right away get productive. I think I've said this before. I did Panama workshop with Chris McGinnis, another OM system ambassador for Wildside Nature Tours. We did a Panama workshop last November. Out of the 6 participants, that was the maximum we would take. 4 had never used flash. I will tell you that 3 were nailing shots like that. Within 3 days, they were getting shots that I would post on social media. Once you understand some basic concepts, then macro with flash is way less intimidating. So I see someone uses the OM1, the Godox V863, 90mm, 60mm, the Raynox 250, Cygnus Tech diffuser, okay? And then Sandra says, hey, from the UK, macro with flash scares her. Jim says he does mostly natural light, macro for flowers. And then Rob from Austin, hey, Rob, moved from the Fuji to the OM1 Mark II macro with flash and the AK diffuser. The AK is what I use. It's my favorite. The guy's amazing. It folds up nice and easy for travel. So let me talk about a few of the principles that I think you need to understand when it comes to using flash. And I'm going to try to make these really simple. There is 2 basic forms of exposure with flash. Manual, where you choose the flash's output power. Okay? That's manual exposure. You choose how much light the flash is going to put out. That seems mind-boggling because now live highlight alerts and live histogram are useless with flash photography. So I actually turn those off. Any custom mode that I program for flash photography, I turn highlights and histogram off in my electronic viewfinder and on the rear LCD. For image playback, I obviously leave them on. So live highlight alerts and histogram is useless when you're shooting with a flash. Might as well turn them off. You don't need it cluttering up the screen. But you definitely want post capture or image playback highlights and histogram turned on. That's a critical distinction there. And the places to do that, the image playback highlights is found under the image playback, the blue square with the triangle in it, kind of the universal logo for playback. And I believe it's page 2, maybe the second or third item down. That's where you would go in and make sure you have highlights and histograms turned on. And then in your custom menu, I believe it's page 4, the second, fourth item down, are where you would turn off live highlight alerts and live histogram. Okay. So for me, there are these two forms of flash exposure, manual and what we call TTL or ETTL, where it looks through the lens. It will shoot out a little tiny sample light, and it will estimate the exposure for you. The problem with ETTL is you don't want to use it for focus stacking or focus bracketing because the exposure will vary. Most likely, you move slightly and it can change the exposure. Now, it will force your flash into manual, okay, when you turn on focus stacking or focus bracketing. And if you've set your exposure using TTL or other things, that can mess you up. So manual exposure, generally somewhere between 1/8 of power to about 1/32 power for your flash is where you want to start, okay? Now, as soon as we put a diffuser on, we lose some light. If you are shooting TTL through the lens, I always start with +1 exposure compensation flash, not in camera, flash exposure compensation. So in other words, I'm telling the camera, whatever you estimate, bump up 1 full stop of light. Manual, I'm going to pick my starting power, somewhere usually between 1/8 and 1/32 power. And I'm going to take a quick test shot. Doesn't matter what it's of. So manual power, here's the thing. The lower the power we go, so full power is 1-to-1 ratio. You will, if you need that much light, I can't imagine a macro scenario where I'd need 1-to-1 unless you're trying to shoot something too far away. So macro means macro. I see people with a macro lens and they're still 2 feet back from their subject. Now, if you're photographing a venomous snake, fine. But for most subjects, we need to be inches away. Okay. So the manual power that I'm going to start with, 1/8 to 1/32. 1-to-1 is the strongest. 1/128 is the weakest. But here's the key concept. As there are 2 key concepts related to this. As we decrease the power of manual exposure in the flash, the distance the light will travel will diminish. So the light has to move closer to the subject. Also, as we diminish the power of our flash, the duration of the flash is much shorter. So if you're photographing at night, we don't really have to worry about shutter speed freezing our subject. It's the very short duration of flash that's going to freeze it. So again, as we reduce the manual power of our flash, the distance the flash will travel dramatically reduces. And the duration of the flash dramatically reduces. To give you an idea, on the OM system FL700, which is what I use, you don't need to overkill your flash for macro. Why add weight? So I like the small 700. Okay, this is my go-to macro flash for on-camera flash. Okay, small, lightweight. As I reduce the power of this flash, the distance it's going to travel will be reduced. And all flashes have a distance scale on the back. So it will tell you how far it will go. And then our diffuser, remember, is going to reduce that flash. You guys have always heard me make fun of chimping, right? If we don't remember what chimping is, that's when we're looking at the back of our camera to see if we got a good picture. Okay, here's my caveat. I need you to listen closely. Macro photography with a flash insists that you chimp regularly to check your exposure. I can assure you, trying to look and see if you really nailed focus. How many of you think you've nailed focus on your camera only to get it on your 27-inch monitor and realize it sucks? I don't waste time really trying to assess image sharpness for macro on the back of my camera. Hell, even I look good at 1.8 inches at 1.4 million pixels. I mean, it makes me look good. Then you put on a 27-inch screen, you go, oh yeah, that's Lee. Okay. So I look at my histogram and I'm looking for blown highlights. I chimp a lot, but here's the thing. Most people, when they're doing macro photography, particularly of well, almost any subject, whether it's flowers, insects, reptiles, amphibians, don't care. I'm not talking still life. I'm always going to speak towards nature photography unless I state otherwise, okay? So follow me. I'm going to take my first shot. I'm going to quickly look at my exposure. If I nailed it, I take a lot of shots. Why? Because even say if I'm stopped down to f16, my depth of field is so shallow that if my body moves 1/8 of an inch, my depth of field is moving dramatically if I'm photographing a 1/2 inch insect. So if you just take 3 shots and look at the back of your camera and think you nailed it, you probably didn't. Okay. I do not bother judging sharpness on the back of my camera. It's just unreliable. And I don't want to waste the time, particularly if I have a good cooperative insect, because you guys know I'm mainly shooting insects, reptiles, amphibians. I mean, I love flowers, but I like having something on the flowers. It's just not my thing, not because I don't appreciate it. I love looking great shots. It's just not, my eye's not really there. I could probably hone it, but I like the challenge of insects, reptiles, and amphibians, and that's just my personal preference. If I really, for those of you that just do flowers, oh my gosh, believe me, keep doing it. There's some incredible shots. In fact, I would suggest that you'll get more wall hangers shooting just flowers than you will an insect on a flower. Most people don't want to hang an insect on their wall, unless you're a real nerd like me. Okay, so. This is the one time in particular where I tell you chimp and chip a lot, but you're chimping for your exposure. Now, once you got it nailed for, excuse me, once you have it nailed for a certain situation, fire away. But here's another tip. I often use autofocus, bird tracking, AI subject deterred. Told you my tongue's worn out. Bird subject detection for insects, because it'll often grab the eyes. I can tell right away if that's not going to work. I reach up, I press my exposure compensation button to turn it off, and I go right back to normal autofocus or focus peaking. Okay. So I take bursts of images, let go, refocus, because even though it may appear it's in focus, I've had too many circumstances where it's not. So I prefer to like reapproach. Now, if I change my angle a lot and I have a really shiny leaf or flower or a limb in the back that could reflect my light, I'm going to re-examine my exposure. Too often, we're not cognizant of items in our field of view that's going to reflect back light and maybe lead to blown highlights. And that's where your eye is going to go first, is the brightest part of the image. Okay. So a couple of things y'all have said. Jeff said it's a shame I'm on at the same time as Rob. I can appreciate that. It's just, this is really the time that works best for me. David said, I'm wanting to try diffuser with the FL600, but haven't done much research. Man, I have an affiliate link for AK diffuser, and the links that guy has gone for me, he's one of the nicest people I've ever met. I love how it folds up. Price is very reasonable. They're very durable. I'm hard as crap on my gear. So highly recommend taking a look at that. Said with focus bracketing, here, let me throw this one up here. So with focus bracketing, it's best to weaken the flash in order to strengthen recycle time. I don't do that because I buy the best quality rechargeable batteries, and my recharge time is incredible. I've never had an issue with recharge time because I only use Panasonic Inaloop. Whoops, upside down. I'm not a Vanna White, obviously. Inaloop Pro. That is the only brand of rechargeable batteries. Many camera stores sell the white ones. It's stupid. They're not powerful enough to run flash as well. I probably own $2,000 to $3,000 worth of these rechargeable batteries because of high-speed Hummingbird setups and stuff. And I will carry 3 sets. So let me tell you all how I carry my flash, and I'll get back to exposures and whatnot. This is the f-stop. They make incredible camera backpacks. F-stop medium pouch. Okay. And what I love about this, everything I need for my flash, including my flash, fits in here, including another natural light. So it zips up. Okay. Oops. Some of my batteries are deciding to exit stage left. Okay. Let me hide the question now because it'll. So when I open it up, you can see I've got extra batteries up at the top, and in the bottom, I have my flash, my battery charger, and another light, a Lume Cube panel, the LC panel one. Oh, hey, somehow I turned that on. That was magic right in y'all's face, wasn't it? So this is a great supplemental light for backlighting, under leaves. So I can carry all of that in this one bag. Here's the Panasonic in-loop charger. They have a faster one now that's really good, high quality. It'll do AA and AAA. Okay. And then I just put the extras in a little plastic case like this, and they slide right in the top. So everything I need, my bird flash, same thing. I have the large pouch for the FL900, battery charger, batteries, and my better beamer. Okay, so this is how I carry my flash in this f-stop pouch. Love it. I never weaken my flash for exposures, for focus bracketing or focus stacking, because I don't need to with In-A-Loop Pros. And because if you're at a low enough, if you're in the 1/8 to 1/32 range, it'll recharge fine. And both the OM system flashes and Godox let the camera know when they're ready to go. Now, fair enough, the longest series I've done is probably 30 or 40 images. I know some of my friends who do 100 or 200. If I were going to do that, I might carry one of those big power packs of 8 batteries, but I don't tend to shoot that many images. That's just my experience in that. So for me, I have tried to let people know macro with flash, you're going to chimp. Macro with flash, I use manual exposure most of the time. Another thing I do, I leave it in an electronic drive mode, and I leave my shutter speed at 1/100th. I don't go up to 1/250th, which is the fastest sync speed if you're doing a mechanical drive mode. Why would I do that? Well, it's because as soon as you shift your camera into focus bracketing or focus stacking, it is going to move into a silent drive mode, and your shutter speed will be limited to 1/100th. So if your exposure is set for something higher than that, it'll mess you up. 1/100th of a second is more than fast enough for this 90 millimeter. I mean, this thing, the image stabilization, the weight, it's just no problem. Okay. So that's how so when I turn on my custom mode in any camera body that is programmed for macro, it automatically comes on at 1/100th of a second, usually f14, f16. And then generally ISO 200 or 400. That's what I'm going to program it for. And when I do AI subject detection, I create custom autofocus point configurations. They're for horizontal. It's kind of a rectangle, a little thicker rectangle that is maybe, I think it's like 30 by 15 when you look at creating a custom autofocus point configuration. And then I create the opposite for when I'm shooting vertical. So if I'm using AI subject detection, that's what I do. If I have to turn off subject detection because it's not working, I reach up and I flip my FN lever, and I use the small, not the single. Now, if I'm photographing a 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter insect, I might go to single. But most of the time, then I'm using the small box, not single, but small. Okay. And I'm going to move that using the joystick to the eye, wherever I want it in frame. I'll just move it around real quick. So with macro with flash, we got to remember that the lower the power, the shorter the distance the light will travel. And I quite often see beginners too far away from their subject for their light to reach. And then they end up increasing the power of their flash, which makes it last longer, which can sometimes lead to ghosting or whatever, depending on the ambient light. So with flash, that's important. Now, here's another important concept. Also, besides the fact that the flash duration is shorter, we control our flash's exposure with our f-stop. Shutter speed only affects ambient light. So let me say that again. If your flash exposure is off, you can adjust your aperture to control that. If you adjust your shutter speed, you're not affecting your flash's exposure. If you're shooting where you should have a green background, but your background is black, that means your shutter speed is too fast to allow enough ambient light to illuminate it, and your flash is not illuminating it. So we can slow our shutter speed down. With the 90, to be honest, I'd go to 1/20th of a second without missing a beat if I thought I needed to. Okay, no problem. But practicing good hand-holding technique is important. Not chicken winging it, right? We're not holding our camera like this. Arms are in tight, pulled in tight to our face, breathing out our nose, not holding our breath, okay? So I want to assure you there's not a specific science on our exposure for macro with flash, but there is a regular range in which we're going to nail it for most situations. What you have to be careful of is if you're doing macro during the day, and if there's too much ambient light on your subject, that can mess you up. Now, one thing I will often do if I'm shooting macro with flash during the day, I will actually lean or move my body around to cast a shadow on my subject. Now, obviously, if you're photographing butterflies or other subjects, sometimes your shadow coming over them can spook them. But moving slow and steady can really help, particularly if it's a partly cloudy day and there's shade and lights coming anyways. So I find that if you can watch your positioning and control your ambient light, flash during the day is just filling in those shadows. I like seeing a lot of the details on what I shoot. Not because I want to do field guide photography, but because so many insects are brilliantly colored. I mean, even flies, when you really illuminate them, there are some colors on flies' eyes and on their bodies that are iridescent, luminate. I mean, just gorgeous stuff, right? So I get asked, so here's a good question. What is my favorite macro subject to get? I tell you, I love dragonflies, but I love, this is what I truly love. I love the hunt for any macro subject, whether it's insect, reptile, or amphibian. When I'm going through a jungle, if I'm in the Amazon, excuse me, guys, or if I'm in Argentina, no matter where I'm at, I love the hunt. So when I find it, particularly if it's in a great spot, you know, sometimes I see a subject and I enjoy it. Some things I might attempt to reposition. Some things you don't touch, you don't mess with. You don't know if it's dangerous or not, right? Or you just know that no matter where you put it, it's not going to be a good shot. But I will tell you one of my favorite subjects are crazy colored beetles. Not just one genus. Like I'll never forget the purple pleasing fungus beetle. I saw it once outside of Iquitos. It looks like it's straight out of Mario Kart video game. Truly, it looks straight out of a game. So that is probably multicolored beetles. Like honestly, if most insects were 6 inches, if most moths were 6 inches to a foot, nobody would hardly give jack crap about birds because the colors are just so much more incredible. Truly. I would say that is, so that's macro with flash. I've gone about 30 minutes. So hopefully there's some tips or new ideas in there that you can try that are going to be helpful. And again, chimp, chimp, chimp. Do not quote me on that. You need to chimp your night sky shots, right? If you're getting a test shot for live composite, you know, you want your stars to be colored in your star trails. You don't want them to be white. That means they're blown out. So there are some rare situations where chimping, but it's chimping for exposure. Night sky, you need to chimp for composition because sometimes it's so hard to see what you're doing, right? So there are a handful of occasions where I say you need to chimp and make sure your exposure is coming in properly. All right. Now, another topic I had down for today that I'd really like to address, hummingbird photography, because it is fall migration. So whether you're on the East Coast where you primarily get ruby throats, where if you live in the Southeast, they kind of start to pile up as they move their way along the coast, coming to Texas to get ready to fly over. Okay. Or if you live out in the West where we get a lot more species, you know, there are a couple of things you need to know about hummingbird photography. One of the most basics, and a couple of friends of mine are some of the most prolific hummingbird banders in the U.S. They're experts. They're, you know, one of them had the amethyst-throated hummingbird, the first U.S. record ever, come into his yard out in my neighborhood. He's since had to move away to care for family, but they taught me if you will put your hummingbird feeders in groups of 3, that will keep one hummingbird from dominating your feeders, because he can't guard, or she can't guard, all 3 feeders. So I will get some of those feeder poles and I'll hang 3 feeders in proximity. Now, at my house, I will actually hang 25 to 30 feeders because I have that many hummingbirds. I don't have to worry quite so much about just grouping them in 3. But if I have a pole up, I put them in a group of 3 on a pole. Okay. Now, so grouping them in 3. So if you're in an area where you're only going to have a few ruby throat or black chins, still put them in group of 3. You'll get more birds in general. Because if you have 1 or 2, one bird can just guard it and run everybody off. But he can't keep everybody away from the ports at 3 feeders. When it comes to buying feeders, really make sure they don't leak, because that will bring in the bees and the wasps and cause all kinds of problems. All right. So grouping them in 3s. Also, if you're going to photograph hummingbirds, when you set up your feeders, whichever group you're going to photograph at, get them used to coming at a height where you want to photograph them. So you may need to put a pole down, you know, buy a shorter pole, but always put a baffle so raccoons and other critters don't go up there and make an absolute mess. Okay, so you want a baffle on that pole to keep other critters from getting to your feeders. I have to put baffles up because I have coons and ringtails. I don't have squirrels. It's kind of nice not having tree squirrels to deal with. My feeders I don't need, but I still put baffles because of raccoons and ringtails and other cool animals. So for hummingbirds, you're either going to do natural light photography, in which you need to understand this. You will not get a shutter speed fast enough to completely freeze their wings. Understand? Now, the OM cameras, the Mark 1, the Mark 2, and the OM 3, if you're in a electronic drive mode, you can get your shutter speed up to 1/32,000th of a second. The speed you need to be at generally to stop a hummingbird's wings is around 1/10,000th, 1/12,000th of a second, which is about the flash duration of your typical manual powered flash at 1/16th power, generally. On most typical speed lights for hummingbird photography, I use Godox manual only flashes. They're $69 each because I own probably 30 to 40 flashes. I'm not spending $500 to $600 to do high-speed hummingbird per flash. $70 if a client burns one up, okay, $70 is gone and that's it. So natural light. Don't always think about front lighting only. Side lighting can be beautiful. Backlighting hummingbirds can be beautiful. If you get cooperative ones, you can set up a wide angle lens and use a remote and get some really cool wide angle shots, right? I think for hummingbirds, when you're doing natural light, too many people get very restrictive on what they're going to shoot. Now, I still use subject detection for hummingbird photography. I've had no problem tracking them. And what I do is, particularly when, you know how you get hummingbirds that come to the feeder and then they back up and they get in a rhythm, those are your perfect subjects. I use a portable dog style blind that I throw up in my backyard, because even though they get accustomed to me, certain movements flushes them, and it takes a bit for them to come back. So when I do hummingbird photography in my yard, I still sit in a flash. Plus, it keeps the sun off of me if it's out. I use a little pop-up dog style blind just to minimize, plus I get so many hummingbirds that you hear their pee all the time on top of it, and I don't really need to get peed on 30 times in a session. So natural light, if we're shooting tight, and I shoot tight, yes, I clip wings and I miss some shots, but I shoot tight, I'll take my ISO up as high as I need to because of DxO Pure Raw 5. I shoot tight. My ISO is going to fall where it needs to. If I'm close, and usually in my yard, I'm usually 10 to 12 feet, maybe 14 feet at most for my hummingbirds. I'm going to use my 150 to 400, and I'm going to zoom in tight, but I'm very quick. Oh, I do like using a tripod in the blind so that when my arms, I can give them a break. And I like a gimbal head. So my Photo Pro E6L, E6, or the E7 is at home waiting for me. I'm going to review that soon on a YouTube video. That's the camo one. Oh, I cannot wait for that. Okay. And that way I can just let go and take a break. Because, sometimes all the birds leave, they're taking a break, and then they come back, and it just lets you rest your arms. So I'm gonna shoot on a tripod, and I'm gonna use AI subject detection. And for the OM1, I'm using the all box. For the OM1 Mark II, I have a box that is almost full size. The engineers say don't use all. On the OM1, I find it works well. On the OM1 Mark II, I create a box that's almost all. Okay. And then I'm probably going to be F8 in that range, F8 to F10 maybe. And then whatever shutter speed, 12500 is generally where I like to be. I will go below that. I will go above it if the light's changing, I'm going to adjust my ISO more than I'm going to adjust my shutter speed. Now, I sometimes shoot at 1/60th, 1/25th for creative shots. If they're sitting still, and you can't really predict this, but you can get some really cool effects. And you don't know that when you're shooting. It's only later when you see it in your computer that you can tell if it's a good shot. So that's natural light. High-speed hummingbird shots are going to require anywhere from 4 to 6 flashes. And you're going to need a remote for the flashes, in which case I have it. I have a remote for OM flashes. I don't use that for hummingbird. It's just too expensive to go buy, even for an OM ambassador. It's too expensive. Like, we don't get discounts even on most accessories. I know everybody thinks we're getting rich and getting everything free. So far from the truth. So I do get good benefits. I want to be clear about that. I love being an ambassador, but it's not what everybody thinks. So for Godox, they make a controller that will trigger, you put on top of your camera, and it will trigger your flashes. Okay. Now, the Sony controller is different than all the others. You didn't hear this from me, but you can actually interchange the Olympus, the Nikon, the Canon controller, because they all have the same flash mount. Sony had to have a different one. So that you do need to make sure you have the correct one for it. I think those controllers are $60. And the nice thing is you can put your flashes in groups. So I have 1 or 2 flashes on my background, depending on if I'm shooting natural background, white to blow it out, or black. Then I don't really put any flashes on it. I want it black. And so how many flashes I have on the back, I'll put that in a separate group. Then I put the ones that are on the bird. And if I'm going to put them at 1/16th power, those flashes need to be within a couple of feet of the bird. Okay. They need to be within a couple of feet of the bird. So I will do my setup, boom, sit in there and shoot high-speed flash. I'm not doing it this year. We had drought for a couple of years. My hummingbird numbers went down and it was stressful. I may well go back to some private 1 or 2 people in my yard photography, high-speed hummingbird photography workshops in 2026. So watch for that. But I'm also going to do, hopefully, a YouTube either live or video on setting it up in my backyard. Okay. Your high-speed hummingbird setup, 1/250th of a second mechanical drive or 1/100th of a second for an electronic drive mode. You're not stopping the hummingbirds with your shutter speed. It's the flash duration. So if you have too much ambient light, you will get ghosting. The flash will fire, freeze the bird, but then the camera will record the bird's movements with ambient light. So it's best to set it up under a porch, under a shelter. I don't have that yet. I need to have one built in my backyard. And I have too powerful of winds to use something flimsy. So I will do it early in the day, late in the day, or I'll set up on the side of the house where it's in the shade or whatever, okay? So 1/250th, generally f14, f16 at ISO 400 because the flash is providing all the light. So that is hummingbird photography, and that is what I like to do. That's how I like to shoot. I will go buy flowers that hummingbirds feed at. I've seen people post Photoshop composites of a hummingbird at a chrysanthemum. Dumbass. They don't feed it chrysanthemums. They feed it tubular flowers. So go buy them. If you keep them in the pot, make sure you water them every day. I sometimes clip off a flower and I use a little clip to attach it near a feeder. What I will often do, I will often put a flower on one side and the feeder on the other. So they come to feed at the feeder, they turn around and feed at the flower. Now, I do not shoot for contests. I think I've entered 6 contests in my life. Oh, if you enter PPA contests, I can tell that at times you're a pain in the butt and you miss a lot of shots. I don't care if you do. They're awesome. Contests are great. Enter them. But if you set up specifically for PPA, you're going to miss a lot of hummingbird shots that you can't use, okay? So that is important. Your water should be at a 4-to-1 ratio, sugar to water, right? So you're going to have 4 parts water, 1 part sugar. And then, make sure those feeders stay filled up. I will often buy, for where I'm going to shoot, small single flower feeders. And that's what I will put in that spot all the time. A lot of people think, okay, I'm going to pull down all the feeders. And that means the hummingbirds have to come to my feeder. My experience is you just have fewer hummingbirds overall. They just leave because they're not going to fight each other. So I have clients come over, well, can we pull those down? I tell them, you shouldn't. I will. It's your tour. Of course, y'all know my phrase, your tour, means I think you're doing something stupid. So I'll say, it's your tour. I'll pull them down, but we're going to reduce the total number of hummingbirds. That's that learn to be patient, take what nature gives you mindset. Okay. So a couple of good things came in while I was talking about hummingbirds. Marco said, hey, Lee, I discovered your channel a few months ago, and I can say that with your videos and your teaching, you've helped me become a better photographer. Okay. That's what I like to hear. Thank you very much, Marco, for sharing that feedback. That's awesome. And then let's see here. He says, if I may, I want to ask you, what is, in your opinion, the biggest problem to solve when it comes to approach the nature life in order to get some remarkable shots? Oh, that's easy, Marco. Most people, and by most, I mean above 90%, do not have enough patience to move slowly, smartly, knowledge-wise, towards or at an angle from a subject to put themselves in the best shot. FOMO, fear of missing out, forces them to go straight at a subject and try to get a photo right now. That is not generally how you're going to capture a great shot. You need to outsmart, outthink, outwit your subject. And you got to understand, tigers are brilliant. Antelope are brilliant because they have to evade predators. So working with things and if you can allow your subject to act naturally and photograph it as such, it will always go better for you. If I'm trying to position and move scorpions, I do it. I did it for a macro class in Austin a couple of weeks ago, but it's a nightmare. Some species will not sit still once you touch them, but sometimes I have to. So if I can allow a subject to act naturally, and if I can be patient, and sometimes you know what that patience means, knowing I may not get a shot, that's okay. That's okay. That's fine. I'm comfortable with that. But that's the biggest problem, is a lack of patience for most wildlife photographers, most nature photographers. It can be for landscape, macro, wildlife, night sky. Most of them don't have the patience to get better. I apologize, guys. I think I've been talking in a certain way, and I've been forcing air over my out of my throat instead of talking naturally. So, okay. So Brandon asked, "What is my hummingbird nectar recipe?" 4 parts to 1. Now, if you got some hummingbirds, because I know you live up in Calgary, I believe, where it's colder. My bird banding friends told me if it's colder weather, you can bump that up and add a little more sugar to give them a little more energy when it's cold. You don't need to do that in the heat, but in the cold, I generally try to clean them. I'm not obsessive about it in terms of cleaning. I don't want a ton of mold, but they also feed it flowers in the wild. I think there's a healthy balance on some of this stuff. Like some people, when you put water out for birds, it's got to be perfectly clean. Well, they were just drinking out of a puddle over here. So I think there's some overplay on that. However, with feeders, we're drawing in subjects in mass where if something gets out of hand, it can get problematic. I don't have a dishwasher. I am the dishwasher. So I get hot water and I get brushes, and I really try to do as good a job as possible. It's not perfect. I can't reach everywhere. That also has influenced by the design of the feeder. But I think some people get a little carried away on clean stuff, like these water purifiers for dog. He was just licking his ass and drinking out of the toilet 10 minutes ago. I don't think a water purifier is critical for your dog. Let's not get to talk about dogs in modern day American society. So Sherry asked me, which remote do I recommend? I assume you're talking about remote for the camera, remote shutter. For the OM1, the OM1 and the OM3, the OM system remotes, they're small. I do not use wired remotes because I see people hold them and start to walk away. I've seen cameras pulled over, tripods pulled over. Wireless, they have a good range. They're easy to pair. Yes, you can only pair them with one camera. Some people gripe about that. Well, I just buy more. I've already spent hundreds of thousands on all my gear. What the hell is another $100? Okay. That's my mindset. I realize other people, there's some accountants out there and engineers that $100, they'd beat you to death for it, right? So I prefer the OM brand remotes. They're reliable. They pair. When you go to pair them, they pair. That's what I use. And y'all might say, well, you're an OM system ambassador. I don't have to use that. Trust me. I have intervalometers and other things, but that's what I prefer. Okay. Yeah, Marco, patience is not easy. I will tell you the best way to develop it is to think like a hunter and not a birder. Most bird watchers do not have nearly enough patience to be great photographers. It's one of the reasons I quit leading birding tours. I couldn't handle the impatience, just the desire to check another box. Okay. So, and I'm not picking on birders. Well, maybe I am, but I don't care. Let's be honest. Yes. Can I tell you, much of my life, I was not a very patient man. I become way more patient because the point is to have fun. And I've seen way too many clients ruin it for themselves and others by not being patient or getting so upset when they miss a shot. That's inappropriate. That's not how we photograph. We take what nature gives us and we give gratitude for what nature gives us instead of being pissed for what nature didn't give us. I had a client thought he was not heard by anybody. I saw and heard him. This was in Brazil in the Pantanal. Had a client go to my local guide and say, I paid this amount for this tour and I want to see this bird. And basically you're going to make it happen. So his mindset was screw all the other participants. And that had been his mindset the whole trip. Oh, the guy wore me out. Fucking wore me out. Oh my God. Telling my local guide, now I happen to overhear it, and I went up to my local guide after that guy left and I said, you understand that none of what he said is important. You know, the funny thing was we did see that bird. I got some great shots of it, but we only saw 3 or 4. Do you know the next year we saw over 50 of them? And I was kind of like, the irony. Okay. So yes, if I could preach only one thing over and over to nature photographers, And patience isn't just sitting in one spot. Patience is observing wildlife and knowing, now I can move closer. If a bird is preening, bathing, if you got a raptor eating something, when its head is down trying to eat, take 3 or 4 steps closer. Don't take 30, because when it pulls up and looks, if you're moving, boom. But if a bird's preening and it's got that wing up and it's preening, boom. I call it getting greedy. That means moving closer at the right time. Okay? Getting closer at the right time. That's patience. Patience is shooting a bird in dapple light and knowing that in 10 seconds, as the clouds are moving, it might be in shade and the background will be in shade. And that's a prettier picture than the bird in shade and the background in sun. That's patience. Patience might be having a jumping spider and it's not at a good angle. You're not going to touch a jumping spider. It's going to jump or run away. But it could be that patience is not taking a picture and bursting it with light and possibly spooking it. Patience is just waiting to see if it naturally turns towards you. Or working with some venomous snakes or other snakes, if I want the head angled a certain way, I can move my other hand out there and do this, and the snake might look that way, or a lizard. That's patience. Patience is cultivating the ability that instead of looking at your images, chimping for wildlife while you're going down a river, is instead of chimping, you will be more productive to set your exposure for the light ahead and be ready instead of, ooh, boy, I got that. That's patience. Patience is knowing that if I had planned to go out and do macro photography, but the winds are 20 to 30 miles an hour, why would I go outside to do that and just get frustrated? Or know that I got to find vegetation behind something, right? And even then, it's probably going to be difficult. You know, patience is if I plan to go do landscape and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Y'all see that blue sky behind me? Without a polarizer, that color sucks ass in landscape images. But most people will shoot that. That is one of the worst colors in photography behind me right now. I call it baby blue blah. You can't make that look good unless you got a polarizer and you're shooting at 90 degrees to the sun. It just sucks. That's a terrible look. This is, whoops, that's the worst. See how it's even paler? That's brutal. That is brutal. Don't even bother. And black and white, yeah. But even then, I'd rather have a polarizer and darken it so that it's more dramatic. Okay. Those are some of the things that I think come into play in patience. Patience is picking the right lens and the right camera for an outing. Okay. That's patience. Patience is knowing you can't do it all. So what do I want to focus on? And being content with that. Patience is going to Costa Rica and choosing to get more awesome images than a ton of mediocre images. That's patience. Patience is learning to observe a subject and see when it might be in the best position for an image. For example, if I come up on say a fox or a bobcat and it's alerted to my presence and it's postured based on the potential of escaping, and you take a picture, that's not going to be nearly as visually pleasing as when the animal is relaxed. Okay. I mean, imagine if everybody took portraits of people when they were terrified, eyes big, gape. No, that's not going to generally be a good shot. Okay. Yeah, Marco, the reason many people are always looking for a longer lens is because they don't develop what I call fieldcraft. They want to make up for a lack of fieldcraft with focal length. But the problem is the longer our focal length goes, the more atmospheric haze comes into play, the bigger and heavier and more expensive the lens is, the faster the shutter speed we usually need, the more objects can come into play and mess up our image. So yeah, I like my 150 to 400, but I don't need the 150 to 600 because I'm going to rely on my fieldcraft. That's just a part of it. And I'm not judging people who don't, but I mean, I just see people, they don't get better because they don't practice the technique to get better. They just want to go shoot a warbler 100 feet away. I don't shoot a warbler further than 25 feet away. I just don't. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I don't have to get documentary shots. I don't have to get a shot just because I saw something the first time. I've learned to be content. Now, if you think I came out of my mama's womb that way, you are sadly mistaken. That is not the case. No way. It took me growing. Everything I teach you is out of a process, a journey over time that I had to develop. I was the birder who wanted to see as much as possible. In my 20s, I was always on the move. But as I'd done photography, I got so into birding, I set my camera down, and one day I went, why did I do that? So I stopped birding. I stopped listing. I don't even take binoculars with me when I go out to photograph. I just don't. Normally, if I need binoculars to see something, it's too far away to photograph. Well, what if it's coming closer? Well, I'll eventually see it, and I've learned to be content. If I don't, I don't. It's okay. Okay. Why do I want to carry one more thing when I'm out photographing? So I want to encourage all of you to work on cultivating patience. I don't know, Marco, if you've seen my video about nature photography success, but my formula is preparation plus skill times patience equals luck. If someone said leave for the next year, you can only teach on one of those. It would be the patience part. It would be the patience part. You know what? Yeah, you know what? This is a great comment. A lot of people have unrealistic expectations when using their camera gear. One of the worst problems out there. You can go buy the same body and lens I have, and you can stand next to me, and you're not going to get a lot of shots I'm going to get because A, I'm fast, I'm accurate, I hunted, so I can pick up finches in flight. Most people aren't going to be able to do that without a lot of practice. I have great hand-eye coordination from sports, wrestling, football, baseball. I was a catcher, shortstop. I have honed skills outside of photography that make me even better. So, that's why all these fucking professional photographers that are trying to teach you how to fix crappy images or use AI and crap. Hey, AI for noise reduction, sharpening, awesome. I've seen this ad lately. Are you still manually editing? Yeah, because isn't that a part of the art and the fun? Fuck me. I just don't get it. I don't need to snap my fingers and have everything work. The journey of becoming better is a part of the fun of photography. Okay. Yes, I would say unrealistic expectations. They destroy photography. They destroy relationships. They destroy work relationships. They destroy all kinds of things. Unrealistic and unspoken expectations. Absolutely. Here's a good question from, I believe it was Timothy. What variable telephoto would you recommend for a first zoom lens? Here's what I need to answer that accurately, Timothy. What genre or genres of photography are your favorite? Post that in the comments, and I'll answer that one, okay? But I need to know what you like to shoot before I can answer that. Timothy also said, good newer photographer here, but thank you for your content. I've been using prime lenses for landscape and street shooting. I have forced myself to use prime lenses more later because of wildlife. I am a zoom lover. I just love my zooms. I do. But I think for landscape and street, it can be good to force you to do certain things by having the limitation of a prime. I think that is good. So Timothy, once you post your genres, I will answer that question. So here's another question, and I'm not even going to attempt your name and butcher it. God knows I wouldn't know it. Would I use a single flash with a diffuser or twin flash with diffuser in the field? I normally do the single. If I'm going to use a 30 millimeter or a wide angle macro shot, I would prefer the twin flash. And guys, if you have that STF8, the twin flash, AK diffuser, I sent him that flash, and he created custom AK diffusers for the STF-8 flash. The ones that come with it, they're not really good enough. So if you shoot with the STF-8 or a twin flash, so I will tend to go more twin flash for wider angle stuff. I use the single flash all the time. Single flash on a long lens for dragonflies, I don't use a diffuser. It's far enough away. Single flash with a long lens for dragonflies, big damselflies, bigger butterflies, I'm not using a diffuser. Okay? I think that's important. All right. I'm looking to see if Timothy sent what genres he likes. I can answer it somewhat, based on your budget. My order of preference for wildlife is the 150 to 400, the 150 to 600, and the 100 to 400. Now, if you include primes, the 300 would fall between the 150 and 600 and the 100 to 400. But for wildlife, 150 to 400, 150 to 600, and 100 to 400. That's the order of preference. For landscape, 8 to 25, 12 to 100, 40 to 150, because I love long lens landscapes. For street photography, I love that 12 to 100. Now, y'all may have noticed I didn't say the 714. Night sky photography, my favorite lens for night sky. I need to probably wrap up, so let's talk about the 7 to 14. I had bought the 714 as my first zoom wide angle lens. And I didn't use it as much because the 8-25 handles sun flare much better. But with the OM1 Mark II or the OM3 with the built-in graduated neutral density filter, for me, the 7-14 has come back into my bag a lot. If you have one of those bodies and that built-in graduated neutral density filter, shove that 7-14 back in your bag. Then you're ready for night sky, and the sun flare is not generally as big a problem. I've been shooting out this window with that 17 f1.8. Oh, the sunbursts off that are gorgeous. Version 2. And it's so small on the OM3, man, it goes in my pocket easy. But I need you to know the 7-14 is an outstanding lens. But, to use a graduated neutral density filter, you had to have a special adapter from Nisi or other companies and then put all this other stuff on there. With the built-in graduated neutral density filter, the 7-14 is back in my bag a lot more. Okay? Back in my bag a lot more. Easy on it. Easy on it. Come here, man. All right, guys, before I go, I'm going to take a second and introduce you to Easiana. This is Easiana. Everybody say hi. She only speaks Portuguese, right? See, and I speak English. So what do? We use Google Translate. We've actually kind of created our own language. We use hand gestures, facial expressions. She is amazing. She knows. She's amazing. So we're going to go into Curitiba, and there's an incredible street market. I'm going to go get some more of those art things with the wildlife on it. I can tell my voice and my tongue. I really can't do an hour and a half today. Hey, guys, thank you all for being patient with me. I know I'm not as animated as normal, certainly not talking as fast. Some of y'all may find this has been better. I don't know. But, hey, I always appreciate you joining me. I have another YouTube Live coming up in August. I'm going to sell some gear that I don't use much in that. So a part of it will be a garage sale. I'll be having some cool stuff in there. Thank you all for joining me. I had a great day. I apologize that it's shorter than usual, but I can tell that tongue is really worn out. So, but my teeth will be so much better. So look at there. Yeah. From Curitiba. It's been great visiting with you guys today. This lady's awesome. I'm so glad I met her. Love y'all. Thank you for your support. I will put a link in this probably tomorrow for some of this gear I mentioned. I'll put some affiliate links out there. Love you guys. Have a great one. Go get some great shots. Easy on it, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Look at that Portuguese from Gringo.